Hello everybody. As you can see from the title of my video, we're going to be ranking my influencer palettes today. It took me a while to do this and decide basically the order of them and for what reasons, because there's certain ones that, oh, I love the color story of this one, but I also use this one more because it's more of like an everyday color story. It's easier to wear, it's easier to match with my clothes, that kind of stuff. But I feel pretty confident in the order that I have landed on. I'm talking with my hands a lot. If you've been on my channel for a while, you know I talk with my hands a lot. But I have 10 or 11 palettes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 palettes to go through today. So I don't want to drag on this intro for too long, so let's just get started. I will preface this by saying I don't dislike any of these palettes. This is a ranking of just the ones that I own. I love all of these. If I didn't love them, I wouldn't have bought them. I like and love all of these palettes, but I was forced to rank them. I forced myself to rank them, and this was just the outcome of that ranking because there's 11 spots. I can't exactly put them all at number 1, can I? Number 11. Number 11. We have the Huda Beauty New Nudes palette. This palette is beautiful. Like, I cannot sing its praises enough. This is an absolutely beautiful palette. Every time I wear it, I feel like a fairy, like a little, like, soft pink berry colored fairy. I love it so much. It's beautiful. But there's 3 shades that are essentially unusable because you have this weird concealer shade here that doesn't do shit. I don't know why it's in here. We have 2 pressed glitters as well, which I hate. They don't belong in palettes. They just don't. I don't know what she was thinking. So already out of 18 shades, you have 3 that you can't use. So while I love the color story of this palette, not only does it have 3 shades that are essentially unusable, but you kind of get the same look out of this palette no matter which colors you choose. There's not a lot of variety in this palette, even though it's still very like everyday friendly, like it's very wearable. And I do love the looks that I get out of it. There's just not much variety to the looks that you can get with this palette. It's really only just one color story and that's kind of it. Plus pressed glitters and a weird concealer shade. I love this palette, but I could have done without those things. And if they'd added like another strange color, like I love the Mercury Retrograde. I don't have that one because I found it's pretty dupeable with what I already have. But something like that would have been really cool. Like add just a pop of color in here that people wouldn't have expected and this would have been great. But no, instead we got pressed glitters. So yeah, number 11. Number 10, my other Huda Beauty palette, we have the Naughty Nudes. This one is a little bit more versatile. This one has more usable shades. There's only really one weird not usable shade, and that's this weirdness down in the corner here. I haven't bothered taking it out because quite frankly, I don't really care. I just don't use it. I have the same kind of issue with this palette that I do with the New Nudes in that most of the looks you get out of this are similar. Like you don't get much variety in terms of different looks that you can get out of this. Granted, I will say you get more variety out of this one than you do the New Nudes. Just because there's more browns, there's more variation of shimmer, and you have a sort of unique shimmer shade in this like blue-pink duochrome that you can really brighten up a look with and make it look different. So with regards to variety and just use the number of usable shades in this palette is already higher than the New Nudes. I also just really love this palette. It's really pretty. Like, I think she did a great job with the color story in this palette, and I don't think it gets enough praise. I don't think it gets as much praise as it deserves, except this shit. I don't know what it is, but they tried something. Also, just 2 of the shades in this palette just make the whole palette for me. It's just beautiful. I've swatched them before in my Animal Crossing video, but it's this blue pink duochrome and then this red shimmer down here called Desire. Oh my goodness, these 2 shades are just phenomenal. There's that blue pink. Like, look at that shift. It's beautiful. And then the red underneath it. Like, that's wild. It's so pretty. So pretty. This palette is worth it for those 2 shades alone. I love them. Number 9, we have the Cosmetics Divine Skies Magic Hour eyeshadow palette. I love this one. I will always sing its praises. I love how wearable this one is. I love that it's literally the perfect everyday palette. And there's something about specifically the shimmers in this palette that are so otherworldly and just magical. I love this shade Magic Hour, which is this sort of peachy shimmer. And then I also love this bronze shimmer at the bottom, Radiant. The one at the bottom, this one's called Radiant, and then that one is called Magic Hour. But just take a look. That's the peach one, and then the bronze. Just beautiful shimmers. In terms of like the shimmers that I have in my collection, the ones in this palette are some of my favorites. I love to wear them just as is on a day, just over some eye primer, and then that's just like a one and done look. Plus this like light shimmer, it shows up as like a champagne in the palette, but on the eyes it has like a very subtle peach shift to it that's just lovely in the inner corner. But the sheer usability and dainty beauty of this palette just knows no bounds. Like I can't really even describe it, how beautiful this palette is. I don't know, I wanted to put it up higher, I really did, but I found myself putting it down low because there's just, I like the other ones more. Like as much as I love this one, I like the other ones more, but I still love it. It's still great. My apologies if that's like the general consensus on many of these palettes, is like this one's here because I like the other ones more than I like it, because that's definitely my sentiment when it comes to a lot of these palettes. Oh, and if anybody didn't know, M Cosmetics is the brainchild of OG YouTuber Michelle Phan. This is why this is ranked among my influencer palettes, because M Cosmetics is her baby. Number 8, also from M Cosmetics, is the Divine Skies Faded Clementine palette. This one, I love this color story. I love this color story so much. I don't know what's happened to me in the past year that I have become obsessed with orange. Like orange and yellow have become my two favorite colors in the span of a year. Specifically when it comes to eyeshadows, I love putting orange on my eyes, but not like bright neon sort of oranges, but these sort of muted clementine faded, exactly the way that it's described for the palette, faded orange looks. And with this you have like the more orangey tangerine side of it, but then you also have that side on the bottom that leans more towards the berry tones, which I love. This palette is so beautiful. I'm in love with it. It was, as soon as it was released, I was like, oh, I'm gonna buy that. And with this palette, I have the same sort of praise that I did with the Magic Hour palette, in that the shimmers are amazing. The shimmers are so phenomenal. The mattes are very soft, very soft and buttery. Like this one and the other one, when I dip my finger in to swatch it, it feels like I'm touching satin or silk or something, some kind of a fabric that my skin just melts into it, you know? It feels so lovely to the touch, even though you're not really meant to be touching it with not a brush, but it still feels really nice. And this palette is just so pretty. It's just so pretty. You can get kind of the same variety as you do with the Magic Hour palette. There's sort of the same variety of colors, not the same tones obviously, but the same like variation in color story. And with this one, you don't really get a highlighting shade. You don't get that like bright inner corner shade that you do get in the Magic Hour palette. But just for color story wise, I like this color story more than I like the Magic Hour one. I think there's something more unique, a little bit more unique, a little bit less dupable about this one than about the Magic Hour one, and that's why this one is a bit higher. Next we have a palette that I was so excited about because it comes from my spiritual homeland, the place that I would one day like to call home, and that's the Exo Beauty Native palette. This is designed and created by YouTuber ShanXO. She is a YouTuber from New Zealand, and this palette, all of the colors and the names of the colors are inspired by different flora and fauna that exists in New Zealand. And that's what the palette looks like. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. It's greens and mustard yellows and beautiful bright shimmers, and it's inspired by New Zealand. I love New Zealand so much. That's where I want to live when I like at the point where I'm ready to go and work like at a small indie studio or something, or even if like a big studio that I'm working for, it has like a very flexible work from home policy and they're like, yeah, you can work from wherever in the world. I'm like, I'm gonna move to New Zealand, bye. This one, just because it tugged at my heartstrings so much when it came out. Also, the color story is just beautiful. It's not the most unique color story I've ever seen, but just having used this, the formula is really nice. The shadows are so blendable. The shimmers are beautiful. You get a wide variety of different colors in here. You have bronze, you have brown, both cool and warm. You have mustard yellows, you have a more taupey sort of brown. You get green, you have gold, you have gray, silver. Like, There's just a lot you can do with this palette. Even though the color story is not the most unique, there's still a lot of variety and there's still a lot you can do with it. That coupled with the theming of this palette is why it's so much higher on the list than a lot of the ones that I've shown so far. I don't know if I actually said the number. I think this is number 7. Yeah, this is number 7. Number 7 is the Native palette with XO. Next at number 6 is another one that really just hit me right in the heartstrings, and that is the Colourpop collaboration that they did with Raw Beauty Kristi, the At Forest Sight palette. Long story short, I immigrated to Canada in 1998. We lived in Edmonton for 10 years, and then we moved out to Nanaimo on the west coast on Vancouver Island in 2007. So most of my teenage and young adult life was spent on the west coast on Vancouver Island or in Vancouver studying and working. So I felt an immense happiness when I saw this, because right now I'm not living on the west coast. I moved out east for my job. So much of the last 2 years has been spent missing home. So when this palette came out and just seeing the colors and how reminiscent they were truly of the west coast, I jumped on it immediately. Like I really, not only did I love the color story, but it also reminded me of home. So I kind of wanted a piece of that. And every time I look at it, every time I use it, I'm reminded of that. So just because this one sits so close to home for me, that's why it's so high up on this list. Also just because the color story is so beautiful. The formula itself of this palette is one of the best I think that Colourpop has ever released. Also, the color story is just really unique. You can just get a lot of different variety of looks with this. It's really beautiful. You have your gold, you have your yellow, and it goes from light to dark. And it's a very wearable palette. Like, there's color in there, but it's not overwhelming, you know? You can make it more neutral, you can make it lighter, but you can also make it really deep and dramatic. The colors themselves, like especially the deep tones, I find if you go in with a light hand, you can add that tiny pop of drama and not go too overboard with it, but you have to use a very light hand because these eyeshadows are incredibly pigmented, like so pigmented. You do not want to go in with a heavy hand with these eyeshadows. The majority of the palette is matte. There's only 2 shimmer shades and 1 satin, and all of the rest of them are matte, which is very unusual for Colourpop, like very unusual. Even though there is a satin in there, I'm not like super mad at it. I wish it had been a matte, but you don't always get what you want. Usually you get significantly more shimmers and satins than you do mattes. So I think, yeah, this palette is just very unique, very wearable. The color story is beautiful. The formula and the quality of the palette is really good. And it reminds me of home. So number 6. Coming up in number 5, we have the Kathleen Lights So Jaded Colourpop collaboration. I love this palette. I have a weakness for jewel tones. Like, it's just so pretty. Every little quad of color could be like an eyeshadow look. Just because of how versatile this palette is, that's why it's so high up on this list. The quality of this palette is fantastic. I do wish there were not these 2 pressed glitters in here. That's like the only critique that I would have about this palette, is I wish that these 2 pressed glitters, because they're beautiful colors, I wish that they had been shimmers or something else other than pressed glitters. I'm beyond the need for pressed glitters. I've never been into pressed glitters. It's no secret. I hate them. I want them out of every palette. So eventually I might replace these 2 with another single shadow that better represents these 2 stones than what is in here. But regardless, I still love this. I love the versatility of this palette. I love the quality of this palette, and the theming is like right up my alley because if you haven't guessed by my tarot background, I'm really into stones and rocks and tarot and witchy things. So the fact that this is jewel themed and just jewel tones in general are my weakness. Like, this was right up my alley, and I'm so glad that I have this. Every time I use it, actually that's what I'm wearing on my eyes today. I used the shades Citrine, so this yellow. I used Jasper, which is this bronzy brown color. I used turquoise underneath the eyes, and then aquamarine in the inner corner and also underneath. It's just a beautiful palette that's super versatile. You can make really natural looks. You can make really colorful looks. You can deepen it out with these like tones on the bottom and make it really deep and dramatic. And the colors are very representative of the stones and the rocks that they're named after. Like this Super Shock Shadow diamond it looks like it's made of diamonds. Oh, I forgot to say, yeah, I have Diamond as like an over top of Citrine. I don't know if you can see the sparkle of my eye lid, but that's Diamond. This palette is just so pretty. It's just so pretty. I love the theming. I love the versatility. I'm not a big fan of mega palettes like this because I find if there's too many colors and too many options in a palette, I tend to get really overwhelmed. I don't do well when I have too much choice in my life. I like choice, but not too much, you know, otherwise I have that tendency to get really anxious and overwhelmed. But with just the way that this is laid out and how it was kind of designed with the idea in mind that each quad would be its own color story, it's a lot more approachable for me. And looking at it with this eye for quadrants to create color stories and looks with, it just makes it that much easier to deal with. It doesn't make it as overwhelming as it might have been if it had been organized differently. But yes, number 5 is the So Jaded palette. I love it. 4 more to go. Sitting pretty at number 4, we have the Moonspell palette from Lunar Beauty. And this one is so high up just because of, first of all, the presentation. This is beautiful. It comes with its own little sleeve, and inside it actually looks like a book with the page designs on the inside. If people don't know, Lunar Beauty is Manny MUA's brand. It's upside down, but that's what the Moonspell palette looks like. It's beautiful. I love the packaging of this palette so much. And because, like before I said, I'm into witchy things, I'm into tarot, I'm into rocks and stones and things. This whole witch themed aesthetic, I'm here for it. But that's what the palette looks like on the inside. Each shade is named after a different witch from different media, so like TV shows and movies. The color story is phenomenal. Like, I look at this and I'm so inspired every time I use it. I've done like mauve-y, sort of almost dead looks. Like I was trying to make myself look dead, but instead I made myself look kind of glam dead for Halloween. You have those like bright turquoise colors mixed with the greens, like the olive tone greens in there. You have brown, so you can make like a more neutral everyday look. You have purple, you have pink, you have taupe. You have bronze. Like, there's so much you can do with this palette. On the basis of versatility, this palette wins so many points for me. I have sometimes an issue getting around the Halloween theme because I have to tell myself, oh, maybe use it because it's not just a Halloween palette. So there's those two sides of my brain whenever I use this. It's like, oh, I want to use it because it's so pretty. Oh, but it's Halloween. It's a Halloween palette. I shouldn't use it except for Halloween. It's like, no, you can use it whenever you want to. It's so pretty. I love this palette. It's fantastic. The presentation, the versatility, theming, and literally everything about it, it's deserving of its number 4 spot on this list. Number 3, we have the Colourpop and ILuvSarahii Through My Eyes palette. This is one of my favorite Colourpop palettes, if not one of my favorite palettes to ever exist. It is so special. It is so summer coordinated. Like, there's something about this that just screams summer to me. You can expect this to be on my best palettes for summer video, but the versatility of this palette, the amount of looks that you can get out of it, and the quality of the shadows is just unrivaled by like most of Colourpop's other palettes. Even the Raw Beauty Kristi one, I would say, is like in quality this one is superior to that one. This one is so beautiful. I love the tones of the colors. They're all so rich. They're all so pigmented. And it's just beautiful. You have these bright fuchsia, peachy pinks. You have these green emerald colors. You have these berry tones. You have orange. You have yellow. You have neutral colors. Like, this palette gives you everything you could ever want and more. It's so beautiful. The color story, the palette itself, like the presentation, it's so beautiful. Like, you have this mosaic sort of design on the front that looks almost like when you're looking through water down into the bottom of the pool, that design that moves on the floor of the pool as the light is shining and refracting through the water. That's what this reminds me of, and it's just gorgeous. I don't really know what else I can say about it. It's one of my favorite palettes. It's so beautiful. We're up to the top 2. If you have an inkling, a suspicion of what these 2 palettes are gonna be, please take a second, pause the video, and type them down below, because I'm really curious what your thoughts are, what you think I'm gonna like. So, without further ado, number 2, we have the ABH and Jackie Aina palette. Is anyone surprised? You'll notice a pattern among a lot of the palettes that are further up this list, that the versatility is really what won out for me in the end, just the variation of different looks that you can get out of these different palettes, and this is no exception. Because the amount of different like toned looks that you can make with this palette is, you cannot compare this palette to probably any other ABH palette that's ever existed, because this one is just so superior to all of them. And I love my other ABH palettes, but just in terms of variation, the only other one that I can imagine might even come close was Subculture, and Subculture wasn't even that varied in color tone. Not to mention the quality and workability of it wasn't great, but this one is completely the opposite in all respects, in that the colors are so pigmented, they're easy to work with. There's just so much you can do with this palette. You can stick more on the pink and purple side, you can make it more neutral, you can make it brown, orange. This shade Sponsored is phenomenal. Like, oh my, hold on. Like, look at that shade. Look at that freaking brown green duochrome. Has the same sort of energy that the packaging does. Do you see that? Oh, so nice. I think that shade Sponsored is probably my favorite one in the whole palette. The shade Trust Issues is also really pretty. I love this purple Bigwig. I love this palette. I love it. I love it, and you just get so much variety in this palette, and that's why I really think that it's deserving of the number 2 spot in this list, as well as the number 1 spot for all of ABH. Like, I think this is the greatest palette that ABH has ever done, and possibly will ever do. I was very skeptical about this palette when before I first got it, because I only got it in January of this year when they were having their sales and they finally brought it back. But since I got it, I'm so glad that I did. It was one of those palettes that at first the color story didn't scream out to me, but once I got it and I started playing with it, it really, really started to work. And I began to recognize the value of this palette just because of the different kinds of looks that you can make with it, because of the variation in color tones and just versatility of the palette itself. It's really good. And if you can still get a hold of this, get it before it's gone, because it is a staple piece to have in any makeup collector's collection. And finally, number 1. This will come as a surprise to no one. It's the Kaleidos and Angelica Nyqvist Club Nebula palette. This fulfills all of my alien fairy princess dreams. Also, it just screams to my nerdy heart, because all of the shade names have to do with nerddom. Star Wars, video games, space shit, I just love it. I just love it. It appeals to me in every single way that it possibly could. The color story is beautiful. You can make neutral looks with it. You can go really, really colorful and dramatic. It goes from light to dark. The packaging is gorgeous. It's thick, but the packaging is beautiful. It's very well presented. The shimmers and the mattes, the formula of them is all chef's kiss. Absolutely perfect. It's very well organized. The variety of the colors is really well done. Like, you can get so many different looks out of it. This palette is just pure perfection. Like, I don't think there's a better word to describe this palette other than just perfect in every single way. They even have a shade name for Princess Leia, who is my favorite Star Wars character of all time. I cannot even begin to express just how amazing this palette is. It's currently out of stock, but they are planning a restock. I think they said for April. And I think that that's the very, very last restock that they're ever gonna do of this palette. So please, if you do yourself a favor, get this palette while you can, because it's so beautiful. But maybe I say that because I'm a little biased. Just a little, because I love this palette, and I love Angie, and I love Kaleidos. So this was just a match made in heaven for me in every way. And it's in this number 1 spot by a pretty significant margin compared to all of the other palettes. Again, that's not to say I don't like the other palettes, just that this one is my favorite because I think it's just so unique and special. Where a lot of the other ones, yes, I love them. I love their formulas. I love their color stories, but this one just excels in every single category. Versatility, quality, presentation, theming, and color story. Like, there's nothing else I can say except that it's perfect in every way. Anyway, that's been me for today. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this ranking. I hope I didn't ramble on and on and on too much, and I hope I didn't bore you like I'm doing right now. Let me know how many influencer palettes you have and which ones are your favorites from your collection. If you have any of the ones that I have and you would have changed this ranking in any way, please let me know. Put it in the comments down below. I love to engage with you guys, even if it's just a few comments. I'll always reply. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps me. If you liked what you see and you want to see more of it, please subscribe. The subscribe button is down below. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.